the ultimate goal is really to be happy and be content. So if you're happy in your W-2, and if you're happy in your life and you want nothing more than what you have right now, quit listening. I don't even know why you're listening. But if you're miserable and you hate your life and you're broke and you hate everything about yourself, then yeah, choose something and go for it, right? And then if it doesn't work, reassess.
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Traveled Show. This is a show about people that were successful in a previous career and left that career to go down a different path. I'm your co-host, Richard Coyne.
And I'm your co-host, Bill Zahller.
On today's show, we have Ryan Groene. Ryan, we're so glad you're here. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate I know we've been trying to do this for quite some time, so I'm glad we can finally find some scheduling that works for all three of us. So.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, Ryan. Well, thanks for being on the Road Less Traveled show. Can you tell us a little bit about your former career and how long you were in that line of work?
Yeah, so my former career wasn't that long lived. I'm 31 right now, but when I went to college for finance, got trained to basically, hey, you're going to go work on Wall Street. That's kind of the type of mentality that we had at the business school that I went to. I went to New York City one time and I hated it. I knew I wasn't going to move to New York City, and I knew I wasn't going to do the Wall Street thing, like investment banking, private equity. That was not for me. So I found my first job right out of college. I was a financial advisor, got my Series 7, Series 63, life and health, did all that. I had the entrepreneurial pitch back then. Hey, you can work for yourself, you make your own hours, all that, kind of like false sense of trap in it. So I found out, got out, here you go sell some stuff to some old people or here and there. And it was, it's tough. And 6 months in, I was like, this isn't for me. And so I quit that. And then I found another financial analyst type of job for an insurance company, Fortune 500 insurance company, worked there for 4 or 5 years, sat in a cubicle and just, in the corporate world, it's as you guys probably know, and your other listeners, it's all about kind of your manager and what have you done for me lately? There's no loyalty. They'll fire you in a second. They literally don't care. They care about the bottom line. They care a little bit about loyalty, but other than that, they'll find another you in a second and they'll pay them cheaper. So made good money doing that, and it helps me kind of realize different systems and what I did and what I didn't want. And then that kind of, while I was sitting at my desk and, in all my free time, I was reading real estate books, going to events, listening to podcasts while I was working and doing all that stuff to kind of prepare me for my next step. And, it took me a little bit longer than what I anticipated, but once you get that first deal done and the snowball, it goes very much faster. So, I found real estate to be kind of a great place for me, and it's better than sitting in the cubicle. So,
absolutely. And to that point, then, what path are you on now, Ryan? On the real estate, you mentioned that. What have you gone full time into?
I'm a full-time mobile home park investor. I will buy other assets as well. We're kind of we own some self-storage and we also own some RV parks, but primarily my first dabble in real estate was mobile home parks. I've never owned any other asset class. I didn't own a single family. I didn't own a duplex. To this day, I still don't own a single family house. Where I'm sitting now is my office from my home apartment. So I've only owned mobile home parks primarily, and that was an asset class that fit well for me at the time. It's still a good asset class. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's changed a little bit as the landscape in every investing in 2022 has changed significantly. So that's what I do now. I'm a full-time, entrepreneurial real estate investor. And I haven't had a W-2 for over 3 years now. So
that's great. Yeah. What was there anything in particular that drove you initially to the mobile home park? Did you know people in the industry, or what pushed you on that path?
So I actually stumbled upon it just by pure chance. So I looked at doing a cheaper flip, right? I was looking when I lived in Cincinnati, my dad's a contractor, and he's like, hey, let's go maybe try to flip a mobile home, right? Because you can buy them back then you could buy them for a few $1,000s. I had the work for free because my dad's a contractor. So, we could put a few thousand into it and then sell it for, a few thousand more, right? Instead of spending $200,000 on a house. And the mobile homes is a good way to get started in any business. If you're even looking to flip or do some side businesses, mobile homes are cheap and that you can typically move them pretty quickly. They're not as illiquid as some houses and things like that because it is cheaper. So looked at doing that, didn't actually do that. Then I'm sitting in this park and me and my dad are talking and just like, hey, who owns these things? And I went down the rabbit hole, started doing a bunch of research, and I just got hooked. And the reasons I got hooked, I can get into, but it's a great asset. It still is a great asset. It's a much needed asset. And that's kind of what took me down that path. And then the role from corporate career to real estate investor, I was kind of forced a little bit. I already knew that's what I was going to do. When I say I was forced, I was in a not so nice way. Yeah, I guess you could say I was asked to leave the company, and that's perfectly okay. I'm not a W-2 employee, and that's perfectly fine. Some of the most successful people in the world have been quote unquote asked to leave, right? So it's not as bad as what people think, especially if you already know in your head what your game plan is. So,
right, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, the W-2 world is not for everybody, and quite honestly, I was in that field for many years in IT consulting, and like I guess the second half of my career was sales and running a region and P&L and all that stuff, and it was great. I had a great experience. I worked with some great people, but at the same point in time, there was kind of like the same thing every day, and there were some things that I would say I differed with how management ran things in some degree, and because of what I did, also I was seen frequently change in leadership on the one aspect of the business, not my direct leadership, but anyway, on the one aspect of the business, and it kind of felt like everybody was coming in and they had the latest and greatest thing, and it was just a new brand of the same old thing. But it was, it was like the newfangled, way of doing it, which just to me was just a total loss of traction, and it just seemed like it wasted a lot of time. So, I'm very fortunate in the fact that the career I did choose to do for pretty much all my career, I was actually, I had constant change. I was going to different clients, different locations, different cities, different towns, different projects. So I did get to see variety versus just sitting in a cubicle and staring at the four walls, which I think would have driven me crazy. So
yeah, and 3 computer monitors. I had 3 computer monitors.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But I'm glad that it happened earlier rather than later. Like I had no family. Right. I was single. I was still technically living at home. So I had a lot more freedom, and that's what I advise people to do. I mean, right out of college, if you have the flexibility, go try something versus going and getting a job, or get a job and then go do something in your after hours. Because when you're 35 to 40 or older and you have 3 kids, 2 kids, and a wife, and this and that. I mean, and you're tired. I mean, you do lose. From my early 20s now, I'm only 31. I still have plenty of energy, but my body aches a little bit more. Like there's just life stuff that happens when you get older too, and it's that's what I highly recommend. Always have something on the side. Yeah. It's not 1950 anymore. It's where you could go work 40 years and be taken care of. Like my grandpa's been retired longer than he worked. And he worked for AT&T. So, I mean, and it's crazy how it is, but that's the world we live in now.
So I like to say that I still feel the same as I did when I was 25. I just take more Advil.
Yeah, same. So,
well, good deal. So Ryan, as you think back to your corporate career, is there a funny story you can share, something that, made you go, oh, why am I here?
Yeah, for sure. It was when I was, we weren't trading stocks. We weren't doing this. We weren't doing that. It was an insurance company. So it was a very strict insurance company, very old school. We still had to wear like kind of suit, professional dress, no facial hair. It was very, very like if you started at 8 o'clock, you'd be there at 8 o'clock. And if you were late, you got rode up. And I was late a few times because, I'm not great at being on time. I think being on time is important, but I'm one that loses track of time sometimes. That's just my nature. It is what it is. I've had it since I was a kid. Doesn't mean I don't respect. That's the way that people see it. Is it's not as respectful. Blah blah blah.
Right.
The way I saw it was, I got my work done. What does it matter what time I showed up? Right. As long as I didn't have a meeting or I didn't have clients in or I'm not out traveling, what does it matter? Right. So that was my attitude, and that's not a good attitude to have. And the surreal moment was like, I had a meeting with my boss about showing up on time. I'm like, dude, I didn't say dude, but like I'm 20 something years old and I'm an adult. Like, why are we having this conversation? Like it's 2015 or whatever it is. Like, what does it even matter if I show up 5 minutes late? I mean, no one, I'm not in a factory line. Like what does, and I said that, and he's like, well, it's company policy. I was like, okay, exactly. Like that's that's when I knew it was the conversation. I knew it was,
Right.
I was not meant to be there. And, there's nothing wrong with having a job, and it served its place in my life. But it was not for me. And that I would rather make less money doing what I'm doing now and have a little bit more freedom than have the security and, trading my life in a cubicle for the money. Right. And I'd rather work 100 hours than trade 40 hours any day of the week. So,
right. Well, I'll tell you what is fascinating, just as you think about it, especially in COVID, because of COVID, the world's changed. And the fact of it is that, the work from home trend is the genie's out of the bottle. And I don't think it's going back in the bottle. I think that, obviously some companies are trying to drive everybody back into the office. Actually, I think I read something the other day that the mayor of New York City was going to try to require companies to change their policy to require workers to go back into the office. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? Do we suddenly become, Russia? What are you talking about? And then on top of that, even though workers who are employed by New York City based companies, they're going after those guys to continue to pay New York City taxes. I mean, are you kidding me? It is ridiculous. And, certainly, like I said, I've been blessed in the fact that when I was in the W-2 world, I was not stuck in a cubicle constantly, time to time, so I was used to the idea that, listen, my phone and my laptop, that's my office. Wherever I am, that's my office, and I can get work done anywhere. And frankly, I think that the argument that says that, well, people have to come into the office to be productive, that's complete horse. You know what? I mean, again, as you said, it's not like you're on a factory line where if you're not in position at 8 o'clock when the factory line starts up, production is going to stop. That's not the case. You're a professional, and motivated professionals will get work done no matter where they are. And yet again, back to the argument about being in the office, how much time is really wasted talking about the Friday night or the Saturday night game or the Sunday night game? And, this why, there's tons of time that's lost in the office. So that is not an argument that says you're more productive in the office. So anyway, that's a tip.
Yeah, I'm with you. But it's, I think even if I was at home working, I still probably wouldn't be, it still wouldn't work. So.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, it sounded like there was a few deciding factors in getting you to change career paths. One, you said you were kind of asked to move on, but you didn't seek another W-2 job. At that point, it sounded like you'd made up your mind through, all the bureaucratic stuff that you had to deal with in management. What was there one deciding factor? Was it just cumulative over time? Is that kind of build up on the side you realized you didn't want to do that, and you at that point had discovered another avenue that you were passionate about?
Yeah, it was a buildup, and probably honestly just from a younger age. I saw my parents kind of look at buying a bunch of businesses and stuff like that, and they had purchased a rental. And my dad is, he's a contractor on his own, but so I had that from a little bit more, I guess, subconsciously from a younger age. I saw my parents kind of go through the process of looking at stuff, but not actually purchasing. Which is, I guess, just a little bit more ingrained in me. So maybe it pushed me a little bit more forward than some others than saying, hey, let me wait till I have X, Y, Z. And I actually, on my first investment, I emptied my 401k. I paid the taxes and that was my down payment. So to say I was against the system is probably more unlikely than most, because I couldn't fathom sitting there for another 40 years, not my 401k money. Because at first, when I first started my investing career, I was like dumping a bunch of money into it, blah, blah, blah. I saw it was going up. And then I was like, oh, can't touch it till I'm 65. I'm 25 right now. So that's a long time. So did that. And then it was just cumulative over time. And then, I've done some consulting work here and there to help pay the bills, because as you know, real estate is the cash flow is nice, but, typically as real estate investors, if you're not charging fees or other things, you get blurps of bigger incomes, right? So, and it can be steady with the cash flow, but you get higher and lower levels of influx of capital through refinances, sales, and acquisition fees. So, and that's kind of, you use those to pay your bills, and some people don't understand it, but it's because there's been plenty of times where I've had not that much money in my bank account, but I'm still doing it. So.
Yeah, makes sense. Sure. So Ryan, as you talked about, again, leaving that you emptied your 401k and used that for a down payment, things like that. As you were making that shift, realizing, okay, look, W-2 world's not for you, corporate world, no. Entrepreneurial path, going into acquiring a mobile home park, and getting people used to thinking about you in that way. Were there some other obstacles you encountered along the way?
Yeah, my mom asked me, like, I think it's 2 or 3 years in. She's like, "When are you getting a real job?" I was like, "I'm not." I said, "This is it." Like, so you always face opposition, even from it's typically not even from outsiders. It's typically from family, friends, and stuff like that, because people see it as like a they don't if they haven't done it, they don't understand it, because there is typically there's a grunt period, right, where you're trying to get something off the ground, even in real estate investing. And because I didn't have a ton of experience in investing, overall, I had a little bit more longer runway than most. So it took me a few years to kind of buy my first property. But I was still doing things, like I was still doing side jobs, this and that. Like, heck, I was walking dogs at one point just to help kind of pay my bills. So that's how, like, I was not getting a W-2. I was just doing like side jobs here and there. So to answer your question, yeah, my family, but it wasn't like a huge opposition. It was just kind of like, sporadic, like, "You still doing that? Like, you still doing the trailer park thing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, still doing the trailer park thing." And, I'm it's paying off, I guess. So,
well, actually, Kiyosaki talks about it, in the context that, our education system essentially is designed to create employees. It's not designed to create entrepreneurs. It's not designed to create people who are going to go out and make their own way. That comes from somewhere else. That comes from being exposed to it. That comes from just a passion in your heart somewhere that, drives you in that direction. And it doesn't spark everybody, and that's fine. But at the same point in time, there's plenty of stuff that needs to be done out there. And again, I respect all people that have W-2 jobs, but at the same point in time, the W-2 world is not for everybody. And, again, it takes sometimes people a while to discover that, but again, it can be extremely rewarding. So nice.
Yeah. And I also think a lot of people out there in the world say you should just quit and go throw everything to the wind. I don't really believe that. I mean, I think you should have a progression forward. I'm not saying you shouldn't throw it all to the wind and give it a shot. I'm saying if you have 3 kids and you have no savings, like, don't just quit. Right? There's a path to that progression. I don't think that gets talked about enough. Is that there's a path forward. You can do things on the side. There's a lot of people just make excuses more than anything. That's what it boils down to, really. Yeah. I just happened to be forced a little bit quicker, and I was younger, so I could absorb it. And if you're older and you got kids, it's hard to absorb because kids are very expensive. I wouldn't know, but that's just what I hear. I imagine life myself is expensive, but there's and you can always do side jobs. Heck, I still do side jobs. When I say side jobs, it's related to what I do, so it's more like consulting work. But I still am in that mindset of the W-2-ish, but I also enjoy kind of like talking mobile home park. So if somebody wants to pay me for it, I'll definitely talk about it. So
right,
absolutely. Well, Ryan, what was one of the first victories you can recall when you transitioned full time into the real estate? Was it the first park under contract, or was there the first raise you had? Did you syndicate these, or what was the process?
So it was they were joint ventures. My first joint ventures are like syndications without the paperwork, right? And you don't have limited partners, but it's lack of a better term. It's very similar. But there's some legal technicalities and stuff like that that you guys know. But so my first deal was a joint venture. Actually, it was a 75 unit park in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I bought that with a few partners that we all were actually chasing the deal, and we were like, "Hey, we kind of know each other. Why don't we just buy this together?" And we all had W-2s at the time. And I was like, "I'm moving to Charleston, so I'll be close. I can be boots on the ground," and it worked out. We held the property for 3 years. We actually sold it this past year. We made a very nice return. It was a turnaround project, but before that, leading up to that, I can remember still, like, I did my own mailers. I did my own everything. And that's just, I built my own database. Like I did everything hands on, and maybe I should have outsourced it a little bit quicker. But I think the first victory leading up to that was like, hey, I send out mailers and I was getting calls. A little bit different nowadays, but back in 2015, you could send out, in mobile home parks, I could send out 100 mailers and I'd get 10 calls. And I'm not kidding. Wow. It was very, very good responses. I was just too young and naive to realize the opportunity that I had, that, hey, I could have bought more quicker. And that's one of, hindsight's 2020, but that's, the 10 caps back then were real. Like people were literally 10 caps, raise the rent. Now you're at 12 caps. It's more like 6 caps and 5 caps nowadays, but those were the things back then. And my first victory would probably be my first closing, I'd have to say, because after that, the concept is real. And, that's how it's become real. So when you wire the money, it's become real. So
that's right.
Yeah. Wire the money, checking. Did it get there? Yeah. So you're right. Absolutely. Yeah. So Ryan, in your new area, your new field of mobile home parks and the other investments that you mentioned, is there a funny story you can share?
Yeah. So to date, we've I bought 15 mobile home parks, 1 RV park, and 2 self-storage. As far as funny stories, I know I had one, but I'm blanking on what it was, and I don't have my show notes. Because I know you guys sent me the questions, but just like offhand, I would say consistently the funny story is that more of a stigma, right, that goes along with trailer parks or mobile home parks. If you've ever seen the show Trailer Park Boys, I don't know if you guys have, but it's a show that is about a trailer park, and it's in Canada, and they film the show, and it's all about like living in this trailer park, and it's crazy, it's inaccurate. The only thing they got accurate in the show is that trailer parks consistently have herds of cats. There's cats always in mobile home parks. I don't know what it is. There's always cats everywhere. I've had them, one time they were like I always, if it's cold out and my truck is sitting there and it's running, I always hit my hood and cats will run out. I've had them in my truck. I've had them on my truck, and they got claws. One time they were clawing at my tires, and I'm like, without like insulting anybody or going into that, I would say that's the most consistent and the funniest is like, there's always a cat. And, to say there's like drugs that happen and badder stuff, like worse stuff. And yeah, there's those things, but it's just, it's opened me up to a reality of America that I didn't know existed beforehand. And, it's both good and bad. But also that's what I would say is the funniest is the cats consistently. I don't know what it is. It's just cats all the time. And everybody always asks me, have you seen Trailer Park Boys? I'm like, yeah, I've seen it. I live it every day. So.
Excellent. Well, Ryan, where are you today in your journey? As you've said, 15 acquisitions, you're growing the company, you're actively pursuing new acquisitions. What's your path or your vision for how you expand the company?
Yeah. So over the next 6 to 12 months, we're probably going to be doubling in size. On like unit count, not necessarily acquisitions, because some of our acquisitions are smaller, like 20, 40, 50 pads, which in the mobile home park world, 100 pads is what's seeked, right? And it's smaller transaction size typically, and you build up a little area, and then you have 500 units in an area. So where we are on the progression is I'm not a beginner anymore, but I've also haven't been at it for 15 years, right? So my path is we're still looking to grow. Mainly build out a team more than anything, because we're a vertically integrated company. I don't outsource the third-party management. All of our managers are on site at our properties. And then we have some back office support, accountants, stuff like that, assistants. But we're really, as we continue to grow, we're either looking to place some regional managers or a true COO. So I can kind of remove myself from the business, because that's the ultimate progression. Like Kiyosaki said in the cash flow quadrant, I want to be on the B and I side. Ultimate goal for me is to be the I, right? That's my ultimate goal in my life. I can invest money. I can be this or that, and I can go do whatever I want, and I don't necessarily have to be there. Like the business is not pertinent and it doesn't matter if I'm there or not, right? It's kind of that now, but it's not. It's very significant. Managers still call me. I'm running the day-to-day on our managers. It's not as intense as apartments because we don't have rentals. But I still am in it day to day, and I still touch our properties. So the goal is to have another spring between my on-site employees and me, And as we continue to grow, we will do that. But, in the times we're in, we're selling some stuff. So kind of it's a teeter totter. I get a bunch of unit counts and then we may sell it. And then now I'm like sitting worth nothing. So I'm like, I'm not going to pay a COO just to kind of do nothing. So I got to acquire more, right? And we're moving into the syndication world. We do syndications. We still do joint ventures, but I don't think I'm going to start a fund. We talked about it a few years ago, but it seems that everybody's doing it, and I really don't want to be a part of that. Just something in me says no. A fund is a lot more than it's a lot, and so that's kind of the progression. And looking to acquire mobile home parks, RV parks. They kind of go hand in hand. I've had we're about 1,000 units, give or take. Our goal is to probably get to 2,000, 2,500 units in the next year to 2 years. But we'll see where the mobile home park world goes. And that unit count encompasses RV parks and mobile home parks. We are progressing into RV parks a little bit more. Reason being is I think there's good arbitrage and lots of good deals still left there. And there's a lot of institutional quality opportunities that we therefore can have a portfolio and package it and sell it if we need to, or refinance and get some good non-recourse debt on it. So.
Right. Nice. Now in the, sorry, real quick, Bill, in the mobile home parks, again, we know that generally the idea is that you really want to own the pad, not the home.
Correct.
Obviously when you acquire a property, you may very well have some park-owned homes. Do you try to move those and turn them into where you essentially sell, and therefore the park doesn't own them anymore?
Correct. Yeah, I want those off our books as quick as possible. Yeah. Doesn't always work out that way, but and it also depends on the area too, because you can make a little bit more in the rental space on newer homes. Like typically, the way I look at it is, if I can't rent it for 5 times more than what my market lot rent is, I don't want to do it. The 5 times is enough for me to hire a maintenance guy and deal with that type of thing. Because we look at it as it's going to cost 50 to 60% on that home based on the overall rental, the revenue. It's going to cost us 50 to 60% in expenses over the course of the renter, right? So because we may be able to rent it for $800 to $1,100, and if our lot rent's $300, I'm probably not going to rent it. I'm just going to have a lot renter. And what we do is typically there's ways to get them to home ownership, through lease options, third party financing, rent to owns, rent credits. I can't say, it depends on the state too, you can do, because the mobile homes are not real property. So there's a little bit of gray area on whether you can actually do some seller financing. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So, sorry, Bill, were you going to jump in there with something?
Oh, no, it's just the part you talked about earlier too, Ryan, about, kind of opened your eyes to another segment. And it seems like it's I think you led into that in the beginning. It's kind of an underserved segment that there's a real need for affordable housing out there. So it seems like that's, I think it's that trend, I think, is only growing as far as that goes. Yeah. So I guess, so I was just, the point there was just, it seems like a good tailwind for your industry moving forward.
Yeah. It's also, I also want to preface that it's non-subsidized housing. So our housing we don't do Section 8. We have no government intervention at all when it comes to rent. Now, the residents may be on Social Security, disability, food stamps, or whatever else government program, but the rent is not subsidized. So I don't want to say it's catch-22, but it is typically the last stop shop for affordable housing. But I would compare, we're always about location. So we always try to buy in A and D class neighborhoods, not in C and D. I'll buy in C, but the D's I don't want, because the mobile home park residents that live in D's are not the residents you want. And that park is always going to do bad. It's never going to do well. And our customers typically would rather live in a mobile home than an apartment. That's just the way it is. And heck, I would rather live in a mobile home as well in certain instances, but there's, it's a unique asset class, and I still think there's lots of room to run in it, but the window is closing. So
yeah. Ryan, in your MHP and RV world, is there anything you do to give back? Anything that you do to help your residents? Anything just you can briefly mention?
Yeah, so typically what we do is when we take over a community or even on an ongoing community, we're typically buying value add plays. Very rarely do we buy stabilized, but we will. Typically, a lot of people have dilapidated houses, right? They may own their home, but they can't frequently paint, put skirting, put a new roof on, like all of that stuff, right? So what we typically do is we come through, we offer a community cleanup type of program where, hey, we typically find a painter, we find a guy that can fix skirting, maybe fix a deck, or do these things. We typically will either, we do charge for them, but we'll do it all. And then we either just say, hey, would you rather have this for higher lot rent? Or we can bill it back in increments that you can afford over the life. And that kind of sounds bad, right? Because I'm not just giving stuff away, but there are certain instances where we just go ahead and fix it, and I don't even worry about it because the cost is so minimal to the park, but it means a ton in the overall picture. Because aesthetically, right, you want these homes to look good, you want people to care, because home ownership is the number one thing in parks. If it's a clean, good park and people care, most of the time they're going to pay their rent. They may fall on hard times because they do live paycheck to paycheck, but most of the time we try to provide just like safe, clean, affordable housing. And then also into the future, we're looking to maybe start like some type of scholarship program or stuff like that. So we're definitely looking to give back to people. And when I'm there, I do talk to people. Like I don't try to avoid people. So I do try to talk to kids. Like there's always kids around, and I try to talk to kids and stuff like that, and just ask them, what their future plans are, what's this, what's that, and honestly, like if in all actuality, if it's a younger family or even a middle-aged family, and they say, hey, we're going to buy a single-family house, we're moving out, not saying mobile home parks are a bad place to live, but what I mean is, if they can go and afford a single-family house, to me that means that they're stepping up financially in the world, which is better for them, better. Like I'll find somebody to rent my home or rent the lot, right? It's not that there's plenty of demand. So also, I mean, just owning the park and not redeveloping it. I mean, I don't want to say that's giving back. It sounds very capitalist and kind of business like of me, but these parks are getting redeveloped at an alarming rate. So if they all get redeveloped and there's no more mobile home parks, there's going to be a gluttony of people that are in these tertiary apartments. And honestly, it's the last great space for affordable housing that's not subsidized. I know there's all kinds of different options, but I still think mobile home parks play well in a lot of areas. So.
Is there a fair amount of pushback as far as I've heard before, like with new developments, like cities, and I guess because the tax base or whatever reason they're resistant to developing new parks on the outskirts of town? Is that what you found?
Yeah, I mean, good luck. If there's a development going anywhere in near any metro population over 500,000 people, I would buy it, and I'd buy it in a heartbeat, even regardless of price. Not regardless of price, but it's the new zoning is mainly what you hinted on, Bill, is the tax basis and the tax revenue for the city or county is not worth it, right? Because most of these residents, they may own a home that's $50,000 or $20,000, and that's personal property tax, not real property. So you tax on that, and then you tax the landowner, which is me, but it's typically, not the same basis. It may be $5 million basis or $2 million. But I also, it depending on the state, it may not reassess for 3 more years versus single families. If you have like $300,000 single families, that quality of person also is a little bit higher income earner, right? So they're not typically using all the public services as well, which in essence could be a drag on government, fire, police, all that stuff. I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm saying from a town's perspective, that's how they look at it. Also, it's kind of the not in my backyard zoning, right? I mean, in all actuality, most people don't want a mobile home park next to them. That's just a stigma that it does exist. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying that it does exist. And with stigmas and certain stereotypes, some things can play out to be true. Typically the resident base is lower income. And there are certain problems if the landlord does not, enforce rules, right? If management just lets things go haywire, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen anywhere. But, where I live, typically it's not going to happen as much as what it would in a mobile home park. That's just numbers. That's not, it is what it is. So,
yeah.
but But there has been some progression forward in certain parts of the country that new development is starting to happen. Out west, there is a little bit more progression than here where we live in Charleston and in North Carolina, right? Because there's a lot more land, and there's a lot more affordable housing per se than out west, right? Where the medium house might be $500,000, right, in certain cities. Versus in Charleston, it's pretty expensive, but you can get out a little bit and still make it to town. Versus in Seattle, you got to live an hour and a half away to even afford or anything affordable, right? So there has been some progression forward. And then that kind of leads me into the next thing is, honestly, I think the next affordable housing potential is RV parks. I know during COVID-19, it's like the highest record sales for RVs, but a lot of these RV parks could play well if affordable housing continues to, be a huge need. We could allow people to live in the RVs, and we do in certain instances as well. So that's kind of our next kind of why we like RV parks as well. So
excellent. Well, and what's something you've as you I think touched on this earlier, but what's something you've recently implemented to help you scale your business? I know you talked about offloading some of the day-to-day tasks and hiring other people to kind of put another layer in there. Is there something you've recently implemented that's helped you achieve some of your growth targets?
Yeah. Hiring a bookkeeper, like a real bookkeeper. There's not many expenses in a mobile home park. There's like 5 to 10. So honestly, if you only have a few properties, it's not that hard to do the books, and we do cash basis. So, and I come from the accounting finance world, so it's not that tough. But unloading that, honestly, and then we're also implementing, we've implemented a acquisition guy below my business partner. His name's Miles. He does a lot of our acquisitions, but we've set up like a cold caller basically to set appointments, do some certain stuff like that. And then just implementing some different systems has helped us as well. Trying to automate a lot of stuff through our property management software, and then also our project management tools has helped too. So
nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. What advice would you give somebody who's looking to make a path change? You mentioned earlier, just briefly touching on have a plan, but can you elaborate on that just a touch?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be real estate, even though we're on a real estate investing show. If your path forward is you want to open a restaurant, or you want to walk dogs and have a dog walking business, or hell, you don't really have to make a ton of money. Money helps, but I think the study was like once you make like 75 grand, typically most of your needs are met in most of America. And after that, it's kind of like, gluttony is what most people would say, but I don't believe that. But yeah, anyways, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is there's different paths forward, and just establishing something. So let me rewind a little bit. So if you're happy in your W-2, and if you're happy in your life and you want nothing more than what you have right now, quit listening. I don't even know why you're listening, right? So that's probably not the case, right? Because the ultimate goal is really to be happy and be content and be, fulfilled, right? That's the ultimate goal. Happiness obviously is a not a continuous thing. It comes in spurts and this and that. But if you're miserable and you hate your life and you're broke and you hate everything about yourself, then yeah, choose something and go for it, right? Don't just like try something and it doesn't work and throw it in the garbage can, right? It's like you call 3 people and they tell you no or to F off, because that does happen in cold calling. Just keep trying, stick with it, give it 6 months, give it a year. And then if it doesn't work, reassess. And if your goal is to have a goal, have a dream, if you don't have a goal, that's number one, right? If you don't know what necessarily you want, like if you want to buy a car wash, you want to buy a laundromat, or you want to just, be your own boss, like whatever you want, you have to establish what you want. That's number one. And then just start taking steps, like small steps consistently over time adds up. I know it's so cliche, but adds up to way more than like just taking big spurts of action. And I would say for me, the difference is the consistency, right? I've been consistent over the last 6 years of just information, always doing mobile home parks, always doing this, always doing that in my free time. And now it's become full-time, right? So now I went from not having 40 hours. Now I'm in it 40 hours. So I'm ahead of everybody else, right? Because I'm in it 40 plus hours or whatever have you. I mean, heck, I could hang up my phone today and go on the boat and it wouldn't matter. My business would still go on. But having a goal and just trying to take action slowly is kind of small steps forward is kind of my best advice, I guess, is what I would say. So it's cliche, but it does, as you guys know, that it does exist for a reason. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. Yeah, I think there's something too to the income side. I've seen that study you're talking about, but I think it was Benjamin Franklin, right? They said basically, if you earn $1 and your expenses are 99 cents, you're happy. If you earn $1 and your expenses are $1, misery, right? People, we've seen, everybody's seen them. You can be broke at $20,000, you can be broke at $200,000, you can be broke at $2 million. I mean, if you have a yacht, a house in Aspen, I mean, if you live beyond your means, there's always going to be that stress and that issue. So, I mean, I think like you talked about earlier, that your goal was to take a lot of that money and invest. So you have the passive income you can live off and it can finance your lifestyle because it's going to snowball over time versus if you live paycheck to paycheck at whatever level, $2 million is still, you're still going to be always stressed in your life and you're always just one paycheck away from ruin. So yeah, I think that's great. I mean, like I said, living within your means and then having the goal of how to increase the passive side of it. Like you said, so you can free up things for what you want. I mean, that's the reason I guess we all work for, to pay the bills, but also to get control of your time as an entrepreneur as a large part of it. Yeah. Well, Ryan, what's the best way for the listeners to be able to reach out and learn more about your business and what you're into?
Yeah. So our website, or my website, is what you can put in the show notes. It's themobilehomeparkinvestor.com. It's always under construction, it seems like, meaning I'm always adding stuff or changing it. You can also find us. It's treesidecommunities.com. I'll email it to you. That's our street name. And then also I'm on all the platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. They can also email me. You can put my email in the show notes. I'm perfectly okay with it. Shoot me an email. I'm happy to jump on a call or, talk mobile home parks. So, because that's number one thing I value the most is I value my time, but I actually enjoy talking with newbies just because I wish I had somebody like me. I did have people like me where I could just call and ask questions and this and that. And that always, and no money, no expectations, no anything. So. Right.
I mean, and we said, almost every show that, even though we're in real estate, it's not a real estate business, it's a relationship business, right? It comes down to the end of the day. It's all about, relationships you have with investors, brokers, management companies, whoever it is. That's what's going to make you successful, like you said. So that's part of giving back too. We think, like you're saying, somebody that's new, have a question, you giving your time and experience, knowledge. That's great. And that's a great. We have host meetup groups to do the same thing, to try to give back because people helped us coming up too. So yeah, I think it's great. Well, Ryan, we'd like to really thank you for being on the Road Less Traveled show today and enjoy the conversation and wish you continued success.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on the show and looking forward to hearing the episode and listening to what you guys are coming out with.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Ryan, thanks for being on. We really appreciate you taking the time. We'd also like to thank our listeners. Please continue to give us a 5-star rating so that we can bring you more great content like Ryan Groene today. And we also want to thank our show sponsor, Park Capital Partners sponsors the show. And we also want to remind everybody that we have the Park Capital Partners Value Add Fund that is available today. It's a 506c fund. And then we also have the Park Capital Foundation that is a 501c3 nonprofit. That is how we give, is another way that Bill and I give back. So certainly please feel free to reach out to us and say hello. And again, thanks for joining in. We certainly appreciate it. Thanks again, Ryan, for joining us. And we also want to remind our listeners, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.